Yo, welcome back to the Wrestling Strength Podcast. As always, I am your coach. I'm your coach. I'm your host, and your coach, Coach Myers. And as always, the Wrestling Strength Podcast is brought to you by Max Effort Muscle. Make sure you go to maxeffortmuscle.com for all your training and supplement needs. All right, guys, got a very special guest for you today, a guy I've known for a long time. He's a training partner. We've worked out together, off and on over the years, and, now in recent times, very regularly. He's not only maybe the toughest guy I know, but also very intellectual, one of the smartest and most interesting characters that I've ever met. I think you guys are going to be kind of surprised by some of the stuff he's going to talk about today. So, my man, no more introduction needed than that. The legendary Matt, the Immortal Brown.
That's a hell of an introduction there, bro.
I had to make you feel important, you know what I mean? Stroke your ego a little bit before we start talking.
It's funny you say I have a tattoo on my stomach. You just remind me of it. And there's a Japanese caricature, supposed to be warrior, right? And, of course, I was like 18, got a dumbass tattoo, and it was I come find out it doesn't mean warrior, actually.
What does it mean?
Which, of course, it means philosopher, though.
You know what?
So it actually worked out pretty good.
Yeah, as you get older, maybe you're even, you're the philosophical warrior, know?
Yeah.
So maybe the guy did you a favor. He thought, you know what?
I know
this guy really is. Yeah, he's not just a fighter. He's a little smarter than that. Yeah. Or
I don't know if there's much money in philosophizing, though. Is that a word?
It can't be
a philosopher.
It can't be your day job. It can be like your side hustle, though.
Yeah.
Or like a hobby, I guess.
Sounds boring as shit.
No, I think it is important, though, to really, I think about things from a big picture sense, which I think is what philosophers do, right? Mm-hmm. Try to look at, the world as a whole and, the things you go throughout, rather than just being pigeonholed about, this and that. So
they make complex things very simple.
Complex things very simple. See, already you're breaking stuff down for me.
Well, I think that's what genius is, right?
What's that?
The ability to make something complex very simple.
Yeah, just to understand complex things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But nothing is complex, though, right? Yeah, like things that seem very complex are actually very simple.
It's just our ability to understand them.
Yeah, the genius is just the one that's able to make it simple.
Right. Yeah, I like that.
I think. I don't know. There we go, philosophizing.
All right, so
making up words.
Yeah, well, changing gears a little bit, Matt. I talked about I've known you for a long time. I think I actually first met you and started training with you down at the RTC when you were going down, 10, 12 years ago or whatever.
Is that where we first met?
Well, I think that's when I first started training with you, but I knew you before that, and we'll get into the RTC stuff later too, because I think people will be interested to hear about that. But even though that was where we first started training together, was down at Steelwood. Mm-hmm. I think I knew you before, but didn't actually know you. I was kind of around you, like in the early days of your fight career. Mm-hmm. And we actually, we had a common training partner, one of my favorite lifting partners ever, TJ Davis, back in, this would have been like early, I don't know, 2002, 2003, somewhere around there. But TJ Davis and I lifted weights. He, worked at Edward Jones on the east side. We had a little training studio out there. And I think at the time he lived in Grove City and was training with you down in Grove City. So maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. Talk about those early days training down there in Grove City and what that was like.
I mean, he was one of my favorite guys too. And other than the fact that we would lift, and he probably hadn't lifted in months and would completely outlift me and make me look like I never lifted before.
Dude, he was a fire plug. Still is a fire plug.
Absolutely, man. Just such a talented guy, man, and just one of the best people I've ever met in my life, right?
Yeah.
But that was kind of the beginning of my MMA journey right there. I'd already had some fights. I did some kind of underground fights. Back then there wasn't a commission or anything. I think the commission had started right around when I was going to Grove City. But the fights that I'd done previously before that, I didn't really train for them. Just kind of thought that I was a tough guy. But when I found that gym, that was my first foray into technique.
And some structured coaching and structured training.
To some extent, yeah. I mean, more structured than training in the grass with my kung fu buddies. And, so that was, I don't know, man. It was very pure, I love that gym. And there was not really anything high level there, but it was just pure, man. You know, just everybody would, you know, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai and stuff wasn't popular back then. It wasn't something that now you can go to practically any town and there's a jiu-jitsu gym of probably a black belt or at least a very good grappler. Back then, I mean, it was just, you know, it was just people that just wanted to train. We just got together and had fun and fucking sweat together and beat the crap out of each other. And half the time we didn't know what we were doing. And, you know, we got hurt all the time. Our mats had holes in them. And, you know, I miss that kind of stuff, man. I love it. But, you know, you have to evolve too.
Yeah, so this would probably been maybe a few years later than that. It had to have been because we had the gym in Pataskal by then. But TJ still lived up here then. And at that time, him and I were still lifting weights together every once in a while. But we would also, I think I was boxing at the time, so we would get together, me, him, you know, Travis Clark, a few other guys who were fighting, and we would, you know, box on Saturdays. Saturdays was like our sparring day.
I think that was the first time we really got together, right? When I
Okay,
came
yeah,
there
it might
with
have been.
Madigan and we boxed, me and you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Madigan and Travis Clark.
Yeah, so this would have been around that same time then.
Okay, yeah.
But what you just reminded me of was TJ, you know, this was on a Saturday. We had a thing going for a while. Every Saturday we'd spar. So Travis and them, they'd bring up some guys from Wheeling. They had a gym down there. And so it was like, you know, that little old room was packed. It was real hot. It was like a sunny day out. The mats are so slippery you could barely, you know, you're trying to box and you're slipping everywhere. You know, me and TJ are sitting along the wall, and we probably got 12 guys in there. You know, I got like, you know, napkins shoved up my nose because it's bleeding and stuff. And I just looked at it, I said, man, just think about it. There's probably a lot of guys that met up with their buddies to go golfing today. And he just looked at me and he said, nobody I want to be friends with. So that kind of sums it up. Like you said, man, just guys getting together for the love of training, get in there and scrapping and stuff. And that's really what it was about, you know, back in the day. Even though, like I said, I never competed or even got close to doing anything like that, but just getting together and sparring with guys and training stuff was just for the fun of it.
It still kind of is to me, man. I mean, I think that's the biggest attraction to this sport. I mean, I love fighting. I love being out there competing in front of millions of people. I love all that stuff. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the most fulfilling part is getting together with your buddies, beating the shit out of each other, and sitting around after and reminiscing and shooting the shit. I mean, I always say, like, I'm never really good friends with anyone that I haven't either beat the shit out of or they beat the shit out of me. Like, you know,
it's a bonding experience, right?
100%, man. You think about it like when you're in elementary school, you get in a fight and then you're best friends after, right? It creates a hierarchy. It creates a new bond between the two of you. You have a new respect for each other. You know, these guys, I mean, you know, I do business and stuff with guys, but, you know, until we've like established a fucking hierarchy between us, it's like, not really that close with you, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, that's probably real similar to what most guys feel with a bond, you know, like in the gym, even if they're just lifting weights together or whatever, you know, they feel like they go through some type of suffering together. Similar to that, we call it the locker room. You know, when you're in high school, you bond in the locker room because you went out and you suffered on the wrestling mats or on the football field together or whatever. And, you know, later on in life, guys have a hard time finding that.
Absolutely.
They're not going to get that from their day job working in an office.
Which is why jiu-jitsu has become so popular.
For sure. You know, Reese and those guys have started an adult wrestling class in New Jersey.
That. Yeah.
Which they're actually just doing like folk style wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, which is cool. And they've had like a huge turnout for it.
Oh, that's awesome. I've thought about doing that before in my gym.
Yeah. Well, because not everyone's going to want to get put in submissions and whatever, but they still want to get the feeling of that feeling of combat, you know, getting in there and scrapping a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah, so going back to wrestling now, so TJ, you know, I mean, he learned he was taking jiu-jitsu and stuff down there, but he was a strong wrestler.
You're telling me.
You know, so what type of, and I remember when he first was training, I remember him telling me that he was helping you with your wrestling and stuff, you know, and this was before you were on the Ultimate Fighter show or anything. You know, how much of a role do you think, you know, especially with you probably wrestled a little bit in high school or whatever, probably similar to like what I did, but you weren't a wrestler. You weren't a D1 wrestler. You weren't Lance Palmer.
I wrestled 1 year in high school.
Right? I wrestled 3, so which is still, you know, not much, you know what I mean? But how much do you think that really helped you as a fighter? You're coming from a guy who was just scrapping in guys, you know, barns or whatever and fighting on these little local cards at a bar to now, like, you got a guy who, you know, first TJ, who was a college wrestler, and then eventually to where you're training at the RTC where you and I first, you know, started hooking up regularly. where you're training with, Keith Gavin's on the world team and JD Bergman and these guys.
Man, wrestling completely changed my entire stand-up game altogether because I'm a Muay Thai fighter predominantly, but it made my Muay Thai so much better. I mean, all combat all works together, right? It's all the same things. It's just different objectives. And just every part of it helped me other than the injuries. And, wrestling probably has one of the higher likelihoods of getting injured. I don't know how many times I would come home after a hard wrestling practice at the RTC and I'm not walking. My kids are coming up to me and like, let's play that. I'm like, you got to give me an hour, buddy. I need to let this kind of filter out here, man. So, but overall, I mean, just the principles of wrestling goes so far with all striking arts, like the posture, the ability to maintain position all the time. And in Muay Thai, there is a lot of wrestling. There's a lot of clinching, and I think that's why my clinch game evolved to be probably the strongest clinch game in the UFC, maybe in the world. I haven't been to Thailand, so I can't say that for sure. But, I think I have one of the best clinch games that's ever been. And I think the wrestling played a gigantic part of that. And that's what like one thing I learned about wrestling was I thought that it was just shooting on each other and sprawling. I thought that's what wrestling is. And then when you go in there and you start going with those high-level guys, like the shots become very, very easy because they're just hand fighting and beating you there.
The positioning is so key.
Is everything. It's everything. That's all wrestling is, really. The shots is like the fundamentals. You have to know how to shoot for when you do get that set up, but that's not what wrestling is.
Well, if you look at, the next level of wrestling, if you look at, D1 guys wrestle, where it doesn't matter how good someone's shot is, how strong they're, how explosive, they have no setups and they can't hand fight or whatever, they're not going to score ever.
Exactly.
You have to move these guys out of position.
Exactly.
So
and you got your anomalies like a Jordan Burroughs. Like he could take a pretty bad shot and still run you over and push you out of bounds and get a point or whatever.
Yeah, he could, but you watch his timing and his fakes.
Setup guy.
Yeah, his setups are unreal. I mean, the way he baits guys into moving, even though they know that's what he's doing, you just still can't.
Absolutely.
They can't stop it.
Absolutely. The only reason I say it is I've seen him take bad shots and maybe even desperation shots when he's down a point or whatever, and he's able to
still scores.
I don't know how many. I mean, how many times has he won the match in the last minute? That's one of his fortes. That's one of his things. And
I remember Terrell used to say Burroughs. People always talk about his shot or whatever, but he would say he has the most terrifying sprint in the sport. Meaning, like once it's like, okay, he got 30 seconds left, 45 seconds left, he needs a score. Yeah. They said his sprint is just terrifying because the guys know it's coming, but his pressure is relentless. His setups and movement is so good, he's going to score.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a very special thing about him, man. And I think a lot of that is those guys, they get defensive. And it's something, we could all learn from. When they lose in that last minute is because they're protecting a score rather than still wrestling with them. And he knows that that's what they're doing.
That's like when you watch a football game and they go into that prevent defense at the end. What happens? The other team just marches right down the field.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, very similar, yeah. And that's something, I try to take from that. And that's one of the beautiful things about wrestling. You can take so much of the little things like that and apply it towards fighting. I mean, wrestling is fighting. It's the beginning of fighting. If you can't wrestle, you can't fight.
Boom, right there.
That's all there is to it. I mean, you can fight.
Well, there's been some great stand-up artists that have tried to cross over into MMA that, they couldn't last because they can't stop a takedown.
Right. They get so far, right, and then they get that one guy, and it's happened to me too. I mean, I've most of my losses have come against wrestlers,
Well, I think it's one of those things where now it's almost just kind of a given, for your sport. You have to be able to strike. You have to be able to wrestle. You can't be like a one-trick pony. You can have something that you really specialize in. Like you said, you're a Muay Thai guy, but you can still wrestle. You still got submissions. You got submission defense. You can't really be one-dimensional anymore. But like if you think back to, You know, we were talking earlier, like the early days of your career, you'd have like, all right, yeah, I got this guy and he was a wrestler. Or I get this guy and he's like a karate guy, or you know,
He's
this
very
guy
specialized.
Yeah, well, this
But
guy's a jiu-jitsu guy.
I think it's come even farther now, where it's at the point where you have to have a specialization far and above everybody else. Israel Adesanya is a perfect example. Like his striking is far and above 90% of people, but he still has to have the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu.
You have to have everything else as the base.
Yeah, everything else has to be there and has to be very strong. I mean, this sport has just come up. The level has just risen tremendously over the past 10 years. So, but now you have to have an absolutely world-class something. And then everything else has to be at very high level, if that makes sense.
No,
Right?
definitely.
And now, I think the biggest difference now in the last maybe 5 or 10 years is, the difference is everybody has the skills now. There's no secrets out there anymore. There's no, there's no 2-inch punches. Right? Everybody knows all the jiu-jitsu moves. Everybody knows all these different things.
Well, there's access to like real camps in every city in America.
Yes. And so now it's really becoming, everybody knows all this shit. So now it's, okay, are you the better athlete?
Right.
And of course there's way more to it than that, but I think that's becoming a much larger part of the sport than it was in the past.
So you've had 29 straight fights in the big show? Is that right? 28, 29, something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So, you, Guida, there's only a couple guys that have really been around for that long and been relevant in the sport for so long that you've been in the UFC for that many fights. Most guys, come in, if they get hot, they might have a couple 3-fight contracts in a row or whatever, but then they disappear and then they're on a different promotion. Maybe they come back at some point or whatever. But you've been there really ever since you were on the Ultimate Fighter show. What do you think has been, some of the keys to your longevity in the sport and to staying relevant?
Oh, man. I mean, the number one thing is all mind, right? And I think that's the key in business, the key in life, the key in strength training, everything. Consistently being mentally, having some mental fortitude, right? Just saying like when I started and I got into this sport, I was in a very low place, in a very bad place. And right there, I made up my mind that I'm going to do this or I'm going to die trying. And that hasn't changed. I still feel that way. Like, this is what I love, and there's nothing else that gets me up and gets me excited in the morning as much as training and fighting, and I think that's what's created the longevity. I think the love and the passion. We were just talking about earlier, right? Like, there's a lot of these guys that just want to be fighters. There's a lot of guys that just,
it's a fashionable thing to do.
Very fashionable, and they just want the glitz and the glory, right? I love the grind, man. Like, every successful person talks about it all the time. It's not the destination, it's the journey, and I love the journey. I love the highs, I love the lows. Of course, you don't love the lows when you're in them, but you can look back and be like, man, that was a great time. And the whole journey has been amazing, and I want to keep the journey going as long as I can, So every morning I wake up and I just try to do the best that I can that day, and just try to be the best person I can be, work as hard as I can, and just get through the day 1% better than I was yesterday. And I don't ask for more out of myself than that.
Well, I think, something I've noticed, and I've realized this about you probably ever since I met you, is that, you wear a lot of different hats. You're a businessman, you're a gym owner, you're a father, all these things. But really, your core, you're a fighter. That's
Absolutely.
who you are.
Absolutely.
You're a fucking fighter, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that, and you probably see this, you've seen it so much because you've been in the sport for so long. Guys come into the sport, they think they're a fighter, they want to be a fighter because they fall in love with this idea of it. But really, at their core, they're not a fighter.
Yeah.
I boxed, competitively, but really at my core, I'm not a fighter. I was good at it. I liked it. I enjoy it. I still enjoy it. Mm-hmm. I'm tough. I won some, I lost some, whatever. But I also knew I was probably, number one, I think when Julie got pregnant, she was like, all right, you're done. Like, that's it. But I also too knew like, all right, I was good enough that if I really wanted to do something with this, I could probably, you know, I could turn pro and fight on some regional and local cards and stuff. I had some talent, but it's, you know, I wasn't really a boxer deep down. Like I didn't have that drive to like, I want to be the best in the world.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's just not me, and that's fine. And I think people, especially as a man, I think a lot of guys have a hard time admitting that, especially if they've already started fighting. They've already had some amateur fights or maybe even turned pro. They got to be able to look and say, you know what? Like, I like this. I enjoy doing it, but it's not necessarily who I am. Matt Brown's a fighter. You know what I mean? Canelo's a boxer. Bivol's a boxer. You know,
all it comes down to is like, look, if you ain't willing to die for this, then don't even do it.
Yeah, I wasn't willing to die in the ring.
Yeah. And most people aren't. And that's okay. That's
okay.
That's why there's 20,000 people watching and there's 2 people in the cage. Right? It's not for everybody, but you know, I would say the same. Like if someone wanted to open a business, I'd be like, okay, are you willing to die for that business?
What?
You know, and maybe that's extreme, but it's more of a mentality, right? Like, will you do anything for that?
For sure.
Like, will you suffer to the max for that thing? If not, you might succeed somewhat. But there's someone out there that is willing to do that, and they're going to beat you.
Well, I think another way to look at that, or a way you could frame it that sounds less extreme than would you die for your business is like, is this something that you're always going to do? You know, so we run into it all the time, you know, in the quote unquote fitness space or the strength coach space or whatever. You know, you get these guys who, you know, on paper, they have all the certifications and they think they know everything or they're doing whatever. And, you know, I'll have guys try to challenge me on Twitter about this or that or whatever, and or in the comments of my Instagram, and I'll think like, bro, this is all I've done my whole life, and this is all I'm ever going to do, whether I'm getting paid for it or not. I'm going to be the guy when I'm 85, 90 years old that's on the news because he's still running Hoover Dam. Right. Like, this is just who I am, you know? This, yeah. And, you know, I look at a lot of these guys that are in maybe, you know, in the same space as me, and I think, you know, 10 years from now, you're not going to be coaching athletes, and that's okay. You'll be working a desk job somewhere, right? Because this ain't who you are. You can flex about it all you want, but it's not really you. You know, you've been doing it for 5 years. Congrats. But it ain't really what you're about. You're going to be working construction next year.
Very true. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess maybe the reason I say it like that is things like fighting, businesses, when you want to pursue this thing, like, for instance, you pursued training people because it's just what you love to do and it's who you are, and you took your time. And if you didn't, if you weren't doing that, you would essentially be dead, right? Like if you were stuck in an office, you'd be as good as dead. Right?
Yeah. I would be hollow inside for sure.
So that's kind of more what I mean. It's like these guys want to do something special, but they're not willing to give every single ounce of their energy. Like these people talk about, oh, I work 40-hour weeks, but on my business, man, fucking warm. What are you talking about, 40-hour weeks? Fucking try an 80-hour week, bitch.
Right.
Try 100-hour week. Try 1,000-hour week.
Yeah, try every moment you're awake working to try to build what you want your life to be.
Yes, that's how people succeed.
Yeah.
In anything, right? You don't. I mean, there's a million ways that people can succeed some, but if you want to truly get above and beyond everybody else and be at the top of the world, you know, that means you sleep, you eat, and you pursue your passion. There's nothing else, right? Like right. And this is a complicated conversation I have with every girlfriend I've ever had. This is like, I've been the worst relationship person ever, but it's because I tell them right at the beginning, look, you're second place always.
And they all probably think, well, I'm going to change his mind on that.
Totally. And then when the reality comes and it actually becomes down between the two, and then they lose, and they're like, "Oh, this motherfucker," you know. And I'm like, "Hey, I told you, you know, don't tell me I wasn't honest." But that's what I let them know straight from the rip. I married the sport.
Married to the game.
Yes, and I am a committed motherfucking husband. You know? You're second place. That's all there is to it. This is, And you know my story for the most part. I'm sure most people listening probably know my story. It's on fucking Wikipedia. If you don't, it's pretty simple. This is what built me as a human being. This is what got me, kept me alive. A relationship isn't going to do that. A business isn't going to do that. Nothing else. Maybe my kids would be the only other thing that I would put in that category, which I didn't have, when I started. But that's the only other thing that would be that high up on the ladder. This sport is what has given me life. So everything else will always be second place to it. Like, I will never give it up. I will never sacrifice it for anything. And, my story is unique, but I also tell people, if you want to get to where I'm at, if you want to get above me, then you have to do what I did or more. You can't do less.
Well, and most guys, I'm going to say probably almost everyone, they're not willing to do that, especially long term.
They're not.
And that's why you're still here and still relevant.
Exactly. Coming back, circling back to the beginning.
Yep.
That is why. And I see it all the time. There's the tough part is there's people like me. I wasn't born with a lot of talent. I wasn't naturally a high level athlete. I was always a good athlete, but not a high level athlete. And then there's guys that are the high level athletes. And you have some guys with a lot of talent, then you have some guys with a lot of work ethic, right? I'm more on the work ethic side, maybe a little bit of talent. When you get the guy that does both, then he's the champion.
Right.
Right. Or at least, very close to champion. So I see a lot of talented guys all the time.
Well, the problem with most guys that were born with a lot of talent is they didn't have to work to develop that talent. Right. So they didn't develop the work ethic. And like you said, the guys that had the work ethic built, or it was just in place or whatever, and have that talent, then those are the guys that are the Logan Stiebers of the world, or the Kyle Snyders of the world, or whatever. But there's probably plenty of guys that were born with as much talent as them that you don't know and you've never heard of.
Absolutely.
Because
we've seen them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we could name them off. We're not going to name names, but I know people with that amount of talent that are working fucking landscape jobs.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same thing in business, or in the strength coach world or whatever. Like, I'm not overly strong or overly athletic or anything. I mean, I've built myself into a decent athlete, like because of my work ethic. But really, I'm willing to do what other guys aren't willing to do, and to do it consistently. And I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm not afraid to put in the hours. I mean, when I started the RTC down there, it was a volunteer position. For the first year and a half, I'm not getting paid anything. Mm-hmm. I'm driving 45 minutes each way to go down, and just for the chance to train Reese Humphrey and Logan Stieber and these elite athletes, because I knew I could help them, number one. And I knew just like, all right, this is going to be my way that I can separate myself from other people in my field, because number one, other people aren't going to earn the opportunity, and I'm going to earn it by impacting these guys. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to show up late. I'm not going to cancel every week and justify it and go, oh, you know what? Tom Ryan's not paying me, so maybe I'll just take this week off.
Right.
No, I don't care if there's only one guy down there. I'd drive in the middle of a snowstorm. And I did it, for a long time, and that's how I earned my spot.
Yep.
And I'm not, I was a kid that I was a district qualifier in high school, but if you ask any high school wrestler in America, they probably know who I am. So it doesn't really make sense, but it does.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, we see it in business and in sport all the time. They're very similar things. Like, if you want a hugely successful business, you have to do what your competitors aren't doing, right?
Right.
You have to put in more. That's all there is to it. There is always anomalies, and there's people that maybe first to market and just happen to, get lucky. There's always these types of things. But 99% of the time, the only way you get ahead of everyone else is do more than everyone else. Right?
I mean, that's the reality of it, honestly.
And these guys just aren't willing to do that. And when I started in this sport, again, circling back to, what we were talking about before, when I started in this sport, there wasn't nothing else. I didn't have any friends. For one, because I quit partying and drinking everything, and I decided, okay, I want to do this sport.
And you had to remove yourself from your old circle.
I had to completely remove myself. And that was when I moved to Columbus. So I didn't even know anybody here. And all the people that I did meet along the way were all fighters or athletes. And it actually kind of surprised me. These guys weren't working as hard as I was. It blew me away. I was like, wait a minute, you're doing, they'd be like, oh, I got to go do my, we're going out this weekend. You want to go out? I'm like, wait, you go out? Like, what do you
probably
mean
in your head,
out?
you probably thought, all right, when I move to Columbus and go to a real, training gym or whatever, everyone there is going to be dialed in 100%. They're all going to be like on their P's and Q's for everything.
Yeah. It took me back a little, it surprised me a little bit. I was like, wait a minute, these guys aren't, like, they go out? Like, what are you talking about, go out? Like, you're not.
Well, there's probably a term for this, but I noticed the same thing. When I got to Ohio State working with the team there, I had this idea in my head that every kid who wrestles at Ohio State is going to hold themselves to this high standard. They're all going to be, Colin Moore, Logan Stieber, Lance Palmer, these guys that are elite. They think elite. They train. They don't leave anything up to chance. But it's just like anywhere else. You get somewhere and you got the guys who are really elite and have the work ethic. You got the guys that are elite that are lazy and pick their spots. And then you got the guys that probably shouldn't even be there. They're there because they want to wear the T-shirt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They want to be in the fraternity.
They're a body for the
other guys. So probably same thing you found when you got to that gym.
Absolutely.
So when I think back to those days too, we talked about there's some guys that didn't pan out because they didn't have the work ethic or whatever. Also, there was no money in the sport, no exposure at that time. Mm-hmm. Who's a guy that you can think of back then that maybe they just missed their window? Not even so much because of their work ethic or whatever, but maybe if they had walked in the doors of, the Immortal martial arts studio now and they're starting fresh, you could build this guy into something special. But it was just the wrong time. It was too early.
TJ.
Yeah. Well, TJ is a guy,
I don't know if mentally he.
Well, I was going to say TJ, I think is too nice of a person, and I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a beast. Anytime I wrestled him, immediately after, I wish I wouldn't have wrestled him because it was like getting ran over by a freight train.
For sure,
he was tough, hard nosed, but he was always such a nice guy too. Even though he might have had the skill set to be a champion fighter, I don't know if he's mean enough. But anyway, I don't know if there's anybody else you could think of.
Yeah. One guy comes to mind. He has a really bad record. I want to say like 2-9 or something. And he's actually the first guy I ever trained with. And it was Eli Ayers.
I remember that name.
Yeah, and because he's just a Marine or Green Beret. I forget which one. I actually just reconnected with him a few weeks ago for the first time in like 15, 20 years. But I mean, this guy was just tough as they come. I remember he had one fight where he had a broken arm. He broke his elbow, got armbarred in practice, and then he had a fight.
He didn't break it in the fight. He broke it leading up
before the fight, yeah, and had a fight that weekend, and he still went and fought and went to a decision, lost a decision. One armed. This guy was just as tough as they come. I mean, just unreal tough. Could take any amount of pain that you put on him. Had a great work ethic and was a really skilled guy. But that was sort of his blessing and his curse. His curse being, he would go fight that weekend with a broken arm.
Yeah, he was too tough for his own good almost.
Absolutely. And he would sometimes go out in fights and almost maybe not let the guy hit him, but he wouldn't think about like not getting hit.
He wouldn't be as strategic as he needed to be.
Absolutely. He'd just be like, oh, you hit me? Okay, cool. Just so tough. And I think had he had some quality coaching, mm-hmm. Someone to strategize with him a little bit, and maybe someone to look up to, and someone that he admired to say, don't do it this way. Maybe practice your skills a little bit more, because he was actually a very skilled guy, but he never really practiced with his skills. He was,
he just loved the scrap, basically.
Yeah. Well, most of our training is really hard sparring. And then after training, we do like body conditioning, and nobody could keep up with him. I mean, we'd be hitting each other in the body, and we even did the. You see some parody, I don't know, some videos sometimes on Instagram. We do like chin conditioning, like we stand there and bite your mouthpiece and like punch each other in the chin. Like we got to make our chin stronger. Like we did that back in the day. We
right.
thought that was what we're supposed to do. and he had a bag, heavy bag filled with sand. He'd punch it with his fists and kick it with his shins, and that thing would just hurt so freaking bad. It was just unreal, man. But like that was like his style of training. There was no one to say, okay, maybe you should drill a couple of arm bars, buddy, and learn how to not get your arm broken instead of fighting through a broken arm.
Well, and someone like that, they were already so tough. Most of the things that you guys were doing training wise were just designed to make someone tough. And he was already tough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he just never had the skill side done. And I mean, we were training at was it Bo Kimley's?
Yeah, I remember Bo.
Yeah, and and Bo Kimley was a karate, Japanese jiu-jitsu guy.
Mm-hmm.
So Bo is promoting this stuff too. I mean, he wasn't coaching us or anything, but he's like, yeah, you need to harden your body more, and Eli's like the hardest guy you've ever met in your life.
Yeah, like you're going to get diminishing returns there, always getting his more mileage on his body.
Yeah.
He needs to focus on other things.
And I think that was what ended up happening. I mean, he just couldn't take it anymore. He just got older and couldn't take it anymore. But I think he's a good example of someone that probably had a lot more talent than was ever, just was never able to pick the fruits of that,
Yeah. I mean, he might just miss his window if he was just a guy coming up now. Who knows?
Yeah, like I said, he came back to the gym. We reconnected a few months ago, and he's actually got like some skills now, But he's still grinding hard as hell. He kind of reminds me like a Tim Kennedy type. I mean, he's out there. He has a gym out in the country somewhere. And
who Eli does?
Yeah, and it's just a fitness gym. They do these ridiculous CrossFit style workout stuff. And again, I mean, it's like you say. I mean, he's just feeding what he's already good at,
right.
Which is a common thing, I think, with athletes and.
Oh yeah, people like to do the things they're good at, not necessarily practice the things they're bad at.
Yeah, especially with fighters. I think it's a very difficult thing. Is to. We do a lot of specific sparring, right? And I put myself in bad positions or positions that I'm not good at. It's like, okay, well, this is where you need to get better. Like, we know you can take him down, get on top of him, beat him up, we know that you could kick his head off if you want, but what about when he's in mount on you? What can you handle that?
What do you think has really changed about the way that you spar now versus the way you sparred back in the day? You said you guys did a lot of hard sparring back in the day. And I think that's pretty common too when people were, first getting into sports. I mean, I can remember even when I first started boxing, and once I had a coach and stuff, like it took a while to really learn how to spar without like someone's getting knocked out.
Yeah.
I mean, you're throwing every punch as if you're in like an actual bout. So how do you think, your mindset for spar? Because obviously you have to be smarter about it now, or you wouldn't even still be able to compete if you're getting in wars in the gym every day.
Well, that's a great point. When I used to train way back in the day, maybe not even that far back, to me, what training was fighting. Right? We would say, if you want to run a marathon, what do you got to do? You got to go run. I'd be like, okay, well, if I got to do a fight, then what do I got to do? I have to go fight. So I would go to the gym. I would go to multiple different gyms, and I would find the best, toughest guy, whatever, and I'd just try to fight him. I remember I was just reminiscing with this with one of my old boxing coaches the other day. Like, we'd be warming up, jogging around the mats, and I'd start pushing guys. Let's get fired up. Like, let's get them mad at me. I want them to come at me hard as they fucking can. I'm gonna try to fight them, and that was how I would spar. That was literally my training. Like, there wasn't any drilling or warming up. It's like, no, we're fighting. And I tell all the people at my gym this. I said, the guy that I was back in the day is exactly who I don't want at my fucking gym.
I was just getting ready to say, I can't wait for someone to show up at your gym this week and do that when they're jogging around the mat, start shoving guys.
There's guys that have done it.
Is it really?
Not shove people, but there's guys that come specifically just to fight, for sure.
Yeah.
And you can pick them out pretty quickly, right? But that was my training, and like I said, I don't want that guy at my gym. So now when I train, for one, my level is higher than probably 90 to 95% of people that I come across, right? So to even have someone to give me a significant challenge is, I mean, it's challenging just to simply find those people. So what I've learned over the years is how to make use of every single person in the gym. It could be your first day, you could be or you could be a, future champion, whatever. It doesn't matter. I need to learn how to make use of every single person, and I need them to come back tomorrow. So when I spar with people, it's always, or train with people in general, it's always very independent of who it is and what their skill sets are. But most of my sparring, what I do now actually is I do a lot of very, very long sparring sessions. I'll go 45 minutes, an hour. I've worked my way up to hour and a half, 2 hours at sometimes. And sometimes it'll be one guy. There's very rarely that I can come across someone that can last that long. But I'm going easy, but lasting that long is hard. So sometimes it's like multiple guys. But what I primarily focus on is, rather than hitting them or striking them with anything to try to hurt them, is focusing on positioning, right? So like this is what I learned from wrestling, right? Like a lot of what they do is like they're focusing on trying to get to a better position, and then the takedown comes easy, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the same in boxing, Muay Thai, striking arts. Is if I get to the right position, then I can strike you however I want. So rather than focusing on the strike, because this is what most fighters do, is they focus on the strike itself, and there's a lot of luck involved with that in striking. There's a lot of athleticism, speed,
timing.
There's lots of things involved with that. But if I can put you in a position where I can strike you and you can't strike me, or at least have a major advantage of striking you, then I'm achieving something. And a lot of that, most people automatically kind of refer to that as footwork, but it's footwork is only a piece of it. There's head positioning, there's positioning within the cage, there's timing, there's tons of
angles is a huge part of it.
Angles, and that all plays into my clinch game too, which is basically hand fighting for the most part. So that's the one thing. And then the second thing is balance. and it's something I've learned from pure Muay Thai. Mm-hmm. So in pure Muay Thai, this is something, if you watch Muay Thai, you'll never understand how they score it, right? If you just go on YouTube, watch like Muay Thai's, TIES specifically has like probably one of the best channels. They show Lumpini fights all the time. And I don't know how many years I watched it and was trying to learn all the techniques and everything, and you're just completely lost on how they score it. You're like, how the fuck did this guy win? He got hit more than, but what the primary, the number one priority of scoring in Muay Thai is balance and ability to like maintain your posture, maintain your balance, they have a actual term for it, a Thai word that I can't remember. But anyway, so I actually use this a lot just in sparring, right? So I try to off balance them and maintain my own balance.
So I guess for me to kind of understand this, like if I'm watching a Muay Thai, or you and I are fighting, pure Muay Thai here, and let's say I kick you, but you don't really budge. You kick me in the same place, but I stumble.
I just got a point.
You just got the point, but I didn't, yes, because I didn't change your balance or your position.
100%. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
That's interesting.
And that's also why they clinch a lot, So you could punch me and kick me and beat me up, and I take a bunch of shots, and then I come in, clinch you, and sweep you. Mm-hmm. I just got way more ahead on the points than you.
It'd be nice if the UFC judges would score those foot sweeps and
right. So yeah, and when you speaking on that, when you look at it as a scoring system, American style versus a pure martial arts or a Thai style, there are those differences, and sometimes you suffer the consequences of those differences. But again, as a martial artist, like my only part of my focus is on winning the fight. Of course I want to win the fight. I want to win every fight. That'd be stupid not to. But I also want to show superior skill too. Right. And balance is a huge part of that. But I also do think that when you create better balance, you become a better fighter too, which is why it's so revered in Thailand. And it just shows superior martial arts, superior skill, a superior fighter. And it's not solely about hurting the other guy, and in Thailand specifically.
Well, I think, kind of early on, you really had a reputation as a fighter, as a brawler.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? But I don't think people would, even though you get into these, fights that turn into brawls, I don't think people would think of you as a brawler now. What do you think kind of changed your mind as far as like, when did you kind of fall in love with Muay Thai, the art, versus like, I want to learn Muay Thai because I want to elbow guys in the head?
I always originally loved Muay Thai the most. It was, and these people call them brawls when really all I'm doing is pressing the action.
Right. That's what I mean. There's a difference between like, I think when people hear the word brawl, they think like two guys just swinging for the fences and seeing who's going to connect. And it's not that.
It's funny. They call me, some people say that about me, but you watch any of my fights, like I don't brawl with people. I press the action and he is forced to throw back at me.
Right.
Like I'm never swinging wild and loopy shots. Like I've never been a loopy shot guy. Leonard Garcia is a brawler. If you remember who he was, like in the WEC and had a few UFC fights. There's a lot of guys that are really pure brawlers. I was never a pure brawler. That's why they kind of call me a technical brawler. But it's just me pressing the action. I'm like, bro, we came here to fight. Like, I want to find out who's better. I'm not going to sit back and, I want to finish you. Like, that's my entire purpose of fighting. Like, I want to finish the fucking fight. Like, I'm not going to sit back and pick you apart. If I'm picking you apart, it's to try to set up a finish.
What do you think has been the hardest fight you've ever had? You've had so many of them. You fought so many like high level guys. What do you think was the toughest fight physically? Who gave you the hardest fight?
Actually, physically, my last fight was probably my hardest. and
man, what a draining fight, huh?
Yeah.
Jeez.
And the whole story behind that, which we don't have to get into, but that was probably one of my more draining fights. Before that, I would say Robbie Lawler was probably. I've had a lot of draining fights, but generally it'd be draining because of different issues in camp or injuries. All these different things. Robbie Lawler was the reason that I go back to that one is because that one I was in good shape, I was healthy, prepared. The only injury I had was I had ended up having a surgery on my hand. I had torn ligament during that fight, but it hurt during the fight, but it didn't really stop me from doing anything. You could actually see the fight where I punched him one time, landed on his forehead, and I like shook my hand. I was like, God damn it! But then I punched him again with the same hand. It wasn't a detriment. But that one, my point is, I was in very good shape. Firing on all 8 cylinders, everything was there, and it was still just an absolute just drainer, and just took everything I had out of me.
Damn. Yeah, I can imagine, man. It was a brutal fight. I remember watching that. And then like you said, this last fight, obviously a brutal fight, very draining. And we don't got to go into details, but I think it's all right for us to touch on it. You had some issues there at the end of camp. It kind of inhibited our training there a little bit.
Which is my fault though. I take the responsibility for that, which I don't think we've ever really even talked about. But I take the responsibility that because what I kind of did in that camp was normally I stay in really good shape, and then camp is just getting ready for the fight. Mm-hmm. In that one, I was really not in good shape coming into camp, and then had everything played out perfect, I would have been in the best shape. But it didn't play out perfect. So it's like, I was kind of trying to play catch up. And you can't expect it to go perfect. Camps don't go perfect most of the time.
There's always going to be something.
Yeah. So, and that's why I'm back here over the summer, and we're building the base we keep talking about. Like, let's get that base up high. So when we get into camp, now we don't have to get into shape now.
Right.
And that's, I hate fighters that do that, and I hate that I did it. I don't remember all the details, but it probably wasn't intentional. But there's a lot of fighters that do that, and that's the difference between a fighter and a martial artist, right? I'm a martial artist. I'm a martial artist for life, and my fight, the way I've always looked at it, is my fight is a picture in time of where I'm at in my martial arts journey on that day, right? That's all it is. So win, lose, whatever, I can look back and say that's where I was that day. It doesn't even matter the opponent, right? That's where I was that day. The journey still goes on. That doesn't mean nothing. It's just a learning lesson, win or lose. Everybody says you learn more from your losses. Motherfucker, you can learn just as much from your wins if you can be pragmatic about it, and you can stop and you can look at it objectively and say, maybe I shouldn't have won that fight, but I got lucky. I've had lucky fights. There's no question about it. And people have got lucky against me. It's a fucking wild sport.
Yeah, anything where you have the outcome at some point is going to be, not only is there a million variables in a fight, it's not like, let's say even like basketball, where the main variable is, did the ball go in the hoop or not? There's a million variables, right. But then you have humans who are going to be biased and who make mistakes interpreting the rules and interpreting the action to decide, who is the winner or the loser, So it's always going to be subjective. But
which they need to fix. The whole scoring system is fucked. And
what do you think about the open scoring?
100,000%. We should have fucking open scoring.
It's the only sport, this in boxing, where the contestants don't know the score.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, imagine Joe Montana
not knowing if they're down by a touchdown.
Down. Yeah, like wait, do you guys remember how many touchdowns we scored, or in wrestling? Like, can you imagine,
not knowing the score till the end?
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
We're so used to it because boxing was always like that, or it is still like that. And obviously, MMA has always been like that since the sport started. We just accept it as normal. But if you really think about it, it's fucked up.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I couldn't imagine. Well, I guess I can't imagine, but just imagine you're competing in something and you don't know the score.
Yeah.
Until it's over, and then they just read it. And and there's no guarantee of how you scored.
And the judges are completely unaccountable at that point.
Yeah.
Everybody just forgets right about it. And they should have it
maybe
in
boxing too. They should have the option to then fight the judges if you don't like the score.
Oh, believe me, I've wanted to. I mean, boxing should be the same way, especially when you got 12 rounds,
right?
And you got a bunch of close rounds. You're like, dude, am I ahead? Like, what do I do? And the constant argument against it is they always say, it's going to. If you're ahead, it's going to make guys want to stall,
but that happens anyway when guys think they're ahead.
Exactly,
it's not going to change.
For one, when they think they're ahead, or also when, it's just many situations like some guys win by stalling,
right?
Like, there's boring fights, okay, that's a part of the sport. Now,
that's why there's a fight of the night, because not every fight is the fight of the night.
Absolutely, and. If for instance, I think I'm ahead, and then I stall, and then I wasn't actually ahead, like, that didn't really change anything. Then if he thought that, or he knows for sure in an open scoring system that he is ahead, and then he tries to stall, right. What I mean? It's like, it's just a stupid argument altogether. And on top of that, to cap all that off, this is entertainment, of course, but it's entertainment for the UFC. We are athletic competitors. I don't walk into that cage to entertain people. I hope people are entertained, and I do. I love it when people say that I entertain them. But I'm an athletic competitor. I'm going in there to win. I'm not going there to fucking entertain you. I'm not a circus show.
And hope the judges see it the right way.
Exactly. Exactly. It's fucking foolish. It's an athletic competition.
Now, do you think it's something that will ever change? Or is it just something that, like, will get brought up periodically after there's controversial decisions, and you'll hear people like us on a podcast talking about it? You think it'll keep, rearing its head, or do you think there'll actually be some change, or what would it take?
It's a good question. The commissions are...
They're old school, but not, and I don't say that in a good way.
Yeah.
I
mean, I have no idea, to be honest. I know that Kansas was actually I think they might have actually started doing it, sort of experimentally.
Well, and it might be one of those things. If a couple commissions do it and then it catches on, it'll be one of those things. Once everyone does it, everyone will be like, "Why the hell didn't we do this 20 years ago?"
Yeah, and it really comes down to Vegas. So like they're the commission.
Yeah.
The Nevada.
Everyone will follow.
Yeah. Vegas, Nevada, and California. If they don't pick it up, then the others are always going to lag behind.
Yeah. If you could think of one other thing about the sport that needs to change, should change, you would like to see change, what is it?
Rounds.
Rounds?
Like, why do we have rounds?
Yeah. So what would you like? No time limit? A 10-minute fight? Like, what do you see it as?
Well, in a perfect world, yeah, I would say no time limit and no rounds. But
now are you thinking about more like the scoring of rounds and that dictating the outcome of the fight, or more like, hey, why do we get a break?
How you score it could be there's a lot of different ways you can score it when you take out rounds. And that would be, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I've considered, making my own promotion like this. What my idea was no rounds, no time limit. Now we maybe would think about putting like a 30-minute time, something insane, and no cage. I really don't think a cage is a good thing either. We could put in a fucking basketball court, like, if that's not big enough for you, then that means you're just literally running. You know what I mean?
Let's fight in the middle of the court.
Yeah. I mean, or just big enough mats where, you have a warning zone and it's like, you start getting too close, move them back or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like it'd be, there's a size big enough. I'm not sure what it is, but there's a size big enough where it would work. And that now it's a pure fight. Like, I think they should have headbutts. I think they should have kicks to down opponents. I mean, every time you take these things out, the UFC says they're as real as it gets. Yes, that's as real as it gets right now, but we could be more real too.
Do you think there's anywhere overseas that has something similar? Where there's some promotion somewhere where they're doing like a no time limit and kind of like the NHB rules where you could knee to the head on the ground and stuff like that.
I've never seen anything like it.
I bet there's one somewhere. We just don't know. Maybe in Burma
we should
or
popularize it. Well, Burma, Lethwei is a popular sport.
What's that?
Muay Thai with headbutts.
Oh, okay. So in Muay Thai you can't headbutt?
No. And Lethwei has some of the craziest rules you've ever seen. So you get knocked out, you have to knock the guy out twice. If you get knocked out, you get a 3-minute chance, a 3-minute recovery to come back. So you actually, and there's no judges either. They don't, like, if somebody doesn't get knocked out, it's a draw, and you get 3-minute recovery to come back. And I
wonder how often the guy gets knocked out, gets the rest for 3 minutes, comes back, and then still knocks the other guy out twice. I wonder if that happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't watch it that much.
I'm sure the odds are probably more like if you get that first one, you get that 3 minutes, you come back, you probably still get knocked out again.
And the best part is, I mean, they're over there in the jungle, fighting this fucking insane sport, and they don't have stopwatches. They're like, you got 3 minutes, and it's like, nobody's keeping track. They're like, they just give you some time. They're like, you okay, buddy? Like, yeah, okay.
Like, all right, he's ready to go. Let's put him back in.
Yeah. What's his name? David Leduc. He's sort of the guy that's popularized it. They did it in Wyoming, actually, recently. He fought Cyrus Washington, friend of mine, who was the first, and they call him Farangs, the first foreign or American Lethwei champion.
That's wild. I'm going to have to look up some YouTube highlights of that.
I'll send you some, man. Yeah, you'll see David Leduc. His stuff is all over. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, Lethwei's gotten a lot more popular over the past few years, mainly because of Dave Leduc. So it's pretty cool, man, but the skill level is still relatively low.
Right.
They're not high-level training over there,
Yeah.
It's sort of a circus thing.
So what do you think about the bare knuckle boxing? Has that ever crossed your mind about trying that later in your career at some point or something?
I don't know.
Or does it not even really interest you?
They've made me offers, actually, and I've thought about it, but I like MMA,
Yeah.
I like watching the bare knuckle boxing. I'd like to see the guys use a little more skill.
Yeah,
They just
those are probably more brawls. Like
those
we
are
talked
brawlers.
Yes.
Yeah. I enjoy watching it though. I've never actually sat down and watched the whole show of it though. I just watch the highlights.
Yeah.
You know, guys that I know that do it, and so I don't know a ton about it, but I feel like I just never see people jab. You know what I mean?
They're all leading with overhand rights.
Yeah, man. I mean, and like I said, I've only watched the highlights, so I don't know for sure. But I did watch the main one. I remember I got into was when Paulie Malignaggi fought that Lobov.
Yeah.
And like
the bald dude, he fought that bald dude.
Yeah. Artem Lobov. And he fucking beat Paulie Malignaggi. Like, so there's something about that sport, man.
Right, because if you looked at them on paper as far as boxing skill, like it's not even close. Not even close.
Yeah, that was so wild, man.
Yeah, I remember. I didn't watch, but I think I watched the highlights of it.
Same here.
Yeah.
I'll
Artem, man, his eyes were like about swollen shut and everything. Man, dude, they were all banged up.
And Paulie's a tough motherfucker. I remember his fight with Cotto. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that fight in particular, no.
Dude,
but I remember Paulie was a bad motherfucker for sure.
Cotto broke his jaw in like the 3rd round, and by the 10th round, he's looking like this, and he's still in there just banging away with Cotto, man.
Man,
it was a great fight.
There were so many great boxing fights, like in the late 90s, early 2000s. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I got sucked into a rabbit hole the other day watching some of like Roy Jones highlights.
Oh God, yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's a lot of them.
Oh man. There's one. He basically like spun around and then caught the dude with the left hook. I mean, just some of the stuff he was doing was unreal.
Yeah, one of the best ever, man.
Yeah.
You still follow boxing though?
I mean, not like you do. You know, I watch it a little bit here and there, but I don't follow it like I used to.
Nice.
Yeah, I used to, college and right out of college, it would be like, we were getting all the pay-per-views, we were watching all the HBO fights and stuff. Yeah. And then just kind of, I still love it. It's just not really tuned into it like it used to be.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, the level now is I think, even boxing, the level has come up tremendously. I think Mayweather had a huge impact on that, just, making it more popular, more money involved. And there's always a lot of money in boxing, but.
Well, there was always a lot of money for the top guys. That was it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's probably, just the marketing of the athletes now has probably helped. So if you're a guy who maybe you're not making millions on pay-per-view, but you're a marketable guy and you have a big following, you can still make money from sponsors and stuff like that.
Ryan Garcia.
Yeah, Ryan Garcia is a great example.
Yeah.
Which, he's a good fighter.
He's a really good fighter.
But, he's I don't think he's a De La Hoya. I know people like to compare him to De La Hoya. But,
well, we haven't seen it yet.
Right.
We haven't seen him fight the guys to tell if he is or not. He's fucking done what he was supposed to do to all the guys that he was supposed to do that to.
Right.
So good for him,
But that's a great example. He's already making tons of money, whereas normally guys at that stage of their career would still be fighting for peanuts with the hopes of, hey, once you're fighting on pay-per-view, then you'll be the guy.
Yeah, which is like the amazing thing about the social media these days. Like a guy like Ryan Garcia, he would be on the making I don't know, $1,000 per round right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or he's maybe a little higher than that, but either way. But because of his social media presence, he's getting main events, and he's one of the most famous boxers in the world now, simply because he marketed himself properly.
Yeah, salute to Ryan, man. Good job.
Yeah, good for him, man.
Right.
I love it. I love seeing it. And but I'm ready to see him fight some top guys, man.
For sure.
Yeah, I want to see him fight Tank or even Haney, this guy's, it's going to be very interesting, I think.
Well, and they're going to have to, bring him into a matchup sooner or later like that, or else people will start to lose interest. Yeah, you can only be the guy who's going to be the guy for so long, and then eventually people will be like, all right, we're...
Yeah, and he'll get there. I think he just booked a fight recently, pretty tough guy, and I can't remember who. But I think he'll get there, man. I think it'll be, there's going to be some big fights with his name on it very soon, next couple years.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, I could probably sit here and talk about, boxing and fighting with you all day. We probably got to wrap it up here a little bit, though. But
I got all day.
One thing, well, I got to train all my high school kids today.
Okay,
what I mean? Which, something I thought of earlier when you were talking about, you kind of made the mistake of letting yourself get out of shape when you were out of camp. This is something I preach to my high school kids all the time too, because I see it or I guess I don't see as much with my kids now because I've kind of brainwashed them. But I tell them, like, even though wrestling season is only, in the late fall and winter time, that doesn't mean you should be out of shape in the summer.
Yeah.
You got to stay in shape so that way when you go to wrestling camps or you go to open mats, you're already in shape. And then when the season starts, you don't spend that first month or two trying to get your lungs. Like, yeah, you got to get back into top wrestling shape, but you should never let yourself be out of shape.
Absolutely.
If you're an athlete, like
especially when you're that age,
right?
It's
yeah,
not
you're
that hard. What else you got to do?
Right, exactly. You're a high school kid. And you want to be a state champ next year. You lift during the week. You can't run on Sundays.
Right.
Come on, get out and run 4 or 5 miles.
Right. There's no excuse for that. At least I could come up with excuses.
Yeah, you got a lot of stuff.
I got to work
on
on my business, or I play with my kids. I don't make myself excuses, but I could certainly find them if I needed to.
Well, sometimes it's reasons, not necessarily excuses, just reasons of why it happened. Doesn't mean that it's a good reason, though, right?
Definitely.
But so one thing I like to ask everyone that comes on here, because it is the Wrestling Strength Podcast.
Hell yeah.
If you can think of one thing from a strength conditioning standpoint, whether it's one exercise, one workout, or whatever that you feel like has really helped your game as a fighter, but we can relate to wrestling to or whatever. If you can think of one thing that you feel like has really helped you, that's translated to better strength, better athletic performance, or whatever. What is it? Like for me, I always say one of the things that's because I've lifted weights forever, but the thing that's probably changed me more as a, not that I'm an athlete, but a quote unquote athlete, a guy that trains whatever, is sled work. Since I started doing sled work 10, 15 years or whatever, it's totally changed the way I run. It's changed my strength. It's changed the way I move, everything. Sled work has been the game changer for me.
Okay. I would say primarily running would be number one.
Which is funny because there's a lot of people that are anti-running now,
Yeah.
But especially coaches, I mean, not me. I love to run.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of strength coaches that like talk about, the pounding on your joints and how running ain't good for you. But you feel like running's has really had a big impact on you.
Absolutely.
I love it.
I think that's by far number one. But number two is something maybe most people probably haven't even heard of it. I imagine you probably heard of it, the FRC.
No, what's that?
Functional range conditioning.
Okay.
I do it every day, usually just at my home, or sometimes when I'm sitting on the couch or as a warm-up at the gym or whatever. It's kind of hard to explain, but what it is going through ranges of motion, and you're building strength at the end range of the joint, at those ranges of motion. So there's a difference between mobility and flexibility, right? I'm sure you understand all this, right? Like, so someone could be flexible. It doesn't mean that they have strength, when they get to that end range of flexibility.
Yeah, like you could do a split, but it doesn't necessarily mean you would be strong as you're doing a split.
Yeah, so it could actually
so a wrestler, for example, like you see a lot of times guys get into a split position when someone's in on a single leg, and some of those guys are strong. There's like, how the hell are they not getting taken down?
Right.
They're strong in a split. I can't do a split, but I'm sure if I could, it'd be real easy to take me down once I'm in that split position.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right, yeah. So that's the whole point of the FRC, is building a lot of strength at the end range of motion. And it really digs as deep, like they talk a lot about internal strength. So digging as deeply into the joint as possible, strengthening the ligaments and the cartilage and different things within the tissues within the joint. And it's a pretty fascinating stuff. And it's really, a lot of it is really stuff that you see in the old school martial arts have been doing for many years. And people, like me and a lot of fighters, we kind of forget about, because it's very boring and it's very slow and it's very monotonous. And I want to lift some fucking heavy weights, man, and get my heart going and get mentally fired up, right? But it doesn't have any of that, And I can show you some movements sometime.
I'd like to try some. But anyone that's listening, they could probably just Google FRC or even look on YouTube and like dig into it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, Dr. Andrea Spina.
Okay.
Spina. He was the guy who created it. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu and a very high-level chiropractic guy. And a lot of what he talks about is all the problems. And I'd almost say he's anti-chiropractic and anti-physical therapist to some extent. And I don't agree with necessarily everything that he says either. I think I would argue a lot of things that he says. But I've been using his system for a couple years, and it's absolutely amazing. Even like I told you yesterday, I came back from a 5-6 hour drive, and I just stop and go through some of his stuff, and it absolutely makes me feel 10 times better.
Nice.
Sometimes you just stop at the gas station and you can do a couple little things.
Matt, you've been holding out on me. You got to teach me some of this FRC shit.
It's great stuff, man. And it's also, I think it's probably a good primer for lifting weights. And
Yeah, something you can kind of work into your warm up and stuff. Or,
yeah. Like you probably don't even notice. Like I do some of it when I warm up most of the time. The thing with it is to get the effect of it, you have to do it for a pretty long time, and you have to be very aware of your, like you can't like just kind of relax and do it. You have to be very aware,
very body conscious of your movement and what muscles you're using or whatever.
Yeah. And and I me personally, when I come to like a gym like this, like my mind is way different than when I'm at home and I'm doing like some FRC stuff. So like yoga, like I'm not gonna do yoga in here, I'm like, dude, no,
I do that like on my balcony or like in the woods. You know what I mean? Exactly,
right. So, and I'm big on that. When I go to gyms, I want a certain feeling, which is one of the reasons I come here, right? Like I want that certain feeling. Like I have, most of this stuff in my garage, but to get that same feeling in your garage is very difficult. And you can kind of force yourself to do it, but
no, it's not the same. The atmosphere is not the same.
Yeah,
100%.
And that's what I learned from Westside. I mean, if you look at Westside Barbell, dude, they publish all their workouts. If you talk to, R.I.P. to Louis, but if you would talk to him when he was around, he would talk to you for 5 hours and tell you everything that he knows. All the Westside guys, they tell you anything to know. That you could buy the coaching.
Yeah, there's no secrets.
There's no secret. He's got 20 books, whatever. Yeah, I know I'm rambling on, but there's no secrets. So why are those guys the strongest in the world? No one else is.
It's the environment. It's the environment. It's the partners. It's the synergy.
Yes.
I can, you think of some of the workouts we've done, whether it's here, whether when we go run hills or whatever. I can do those same workouts by myself, and I'm not going to get the same thing out of them.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I think that the synergy of the partnership is a big thing.
Yeah.
And the environment for sure.
Yeah.
Choose your training partners wisely.
Absolutely. Right. That's exactly it, man. And Louis talked about it a lot too. He would always talk about it, how to choose. I think he wrote articles about it, like choosing your training partners. And
sometimes you have to fire them too,
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think, I don't even remember where we're going with that, but see the FRC.
FRC, yeah.
So when I do that, I that's why I haven't really done it here. Like and that's why I don't really do my McGill stuff here as much as I probably should either, which is absolutely a great primer and a great exercise to be doing all the time. But sorry, I'm boring you, bro.
No.
But
dude, I got up early today, man. Cut me some slack.
But when I come to a place like this, I'm like, I'm here to work. I'm not here to prime my muscles. I'm not here to feel better. Like I'm here to fucking crawl out.
Yeah, you come in, the music's on and whatever. It's like it puts you in a certain mindset for sure.
Yes,
and I find
that's the most important thing.
I find myself sometimes too. I have to kind of like pull myself back and say, wait a minute, I still have to be smart about what we're gonna do today, and I got to make sure, like, all right, Matt, you got to do this as part of your warm up. You got to do that. When really, sometimes I just want to fucking get after it.
Yeah.
I feel the same way too, but I got to try
to. I do a ton of that stuff: bands, FRC, yoga, the traditional martial arts stuff. I do a ton of that stuff outside of here. So, when I come here, I'm perfectly happy to just fucking, warm up and fucking hammer it, man.
All right. So for wrestlers and fighters they're listening, Google FRC.
Yeah.
Make sure you're running hard. Matt said that's important. And number 3, Matt, where can they find you? Where can they check your gym out at? And you might as well give a little plug for your coffee too.
Oh yeah, I got a coffee company. I got a gym and all that stuff. I am the Immortal on Instagram, Twitter. At the Immortal Coffee on Instagram, Twitter. I think Twitter is like at the Immortal Cough or something because it cuts off. You can only have so many letters or something, so many characters, something like that. But I don't know. You'll find it on my page if you go through. My gym's up there in Lewis Center. Stop by if you're in town or want to get in a little workout. What else is there? I think that's all I got to plug today.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, I appreciate you coming on, man.
My pleasure, you know.
All right, and we're out.
Sweet.